You share the same bed, but it feels like you live on different continents. Conversations that once carried dreams now sound like negotiations. Admiration quietly turns into resentment, and without realizing it, love becomes a silent war fought over breakfast and unfinished sentences. A marriage crisis is not just a relationship problem. It's the collapse of what was supposed to be your safest place. And in moments like this, most people search for better communication techniques, new advice, or someone else to blame. But what if the most powerful solution wasn't invented by modern psychology, but written nearly 2,000 years ago by men who survived war, exile, and absolute loss? What if saving your marriage has less to do with changing your partner and everything to do with mastering yourself? Here at Stoic Lighthouse, we don't chase quick fixes or emotional shortcuts. We look for clarity, direction, and inner steadiness in the middle of life's storms. Stoicism was never meant to make life comfortable. It was designed to make human beings resilient. And when it comes to marriage, resilience often saves what passion alone cannot sustain. Today, we'll explore 4 Stoic principles that can radically change the dynamics of your relationship. You won't learn how to control your partner. You'll learn how to become so grounded, so disciplined, and so internally stable that chaos around you loses its power. And paradoxically, that's where real change begins. Number 1, the war ends. Here, stop trying to change your partner. Most marriages don't collapse because of one dramatic betrayal. They slowly erode under constant friction, and at the center of that friction is one deeply human impulse, the urge to change the person you love. He should be more organized. She worries too much. He never listens. She spends irresponsibly. Without noticing, we turn into inspectors of someone else's behavior. Our peace becomes conditional. I'll be calm when you change. That mindset alone is enough to poison any relationship. From a Stoic perspective, this struggle is not just exhausting, it's irrational. Epictetus, one of the most uncompromising Stoic teachers, built his entire philosophy around a single distinction. Before offering any advice, he drew a hard line between what belongs to us and what never will. Epictetus warned, "Some things are up to us, and some things are not." Your partner's thoughts, habits, emotional reactions, and inner world sit firmly outside your control. Trying to govern them through criticism, pressure, or emotional leverage is like arguing with the weather. You don't win, you just suffer longer. This is where the Stoic shift begins. Instead of asking, "How do I get them to stop doing this?" the better question becomes, "How do I respond to this with character?" That change of focus is not passive, it's powerful. If your partner is disorganized, complaining accomplishes nothing. Patience, structure, and clear boundaries do. If your partner is anxious, demanding calm only fuels fear. Steadiness, listening, and emotional restraint create safety. These responses may feel subtle, but they operate in the only territory you truly govern, your own choices. Modern psychology echoes this ancient insight. Mark Manson, writing in a very different tone, reaches the same Stoic conclusion. Mark Manson explains, "You can't control another person's actions, you can only control your own reactions. That's where all real responsibility begins." The moment you stop trying to change your partner, something unexpected happens. Your inner tension drops. Their defensiveness weakens, and the emotional battlefield begins to quiet. Not because you gave up on the relationship, but because you finally stopped fighting a war you were never meant to win. And here's the paradox. Stoicism understood long ago. When you focus on refining yourself rather than reshaping others, you become the strongest form of influence available. Not force, not persuasion. Example. This is not surrender, it's the beginning of authority. Number 2, the death of expectation. Love the partner you have, not the one you imagined. Most long-term relationships don't break under sudden catastrophe. They decay quietly, through disappointment that's never fully spoken. Not anger, but expectation becomes the corrosive force. They should just know how I feel. He should be more ambitious. She should remember what matters to me. These thoughts feel harmless, even reasonable. But over time, they create a second, invisible relationship. But not with the real human being beside you, but with an imagined version who never existed. Stoicism recognized this pattern centuries ago and named the cure with brutal clarity: amor fati, love of fate. Applied to marriage, amor fati is not resignation. It is not settling. It is the disciplined decision to fully accept the person you chose, not as an idea, but as a reality. Marcus Aurelios, who lived under relentless pressure and disappointment, trained himself to release the fantasy of how people should be. Marcus Aurelios reflected, "Accept the things to which fate binds you, and love the people with whom fate brings you together. Not tolerate, not endure, love." Expectation creates suffering because it asks reality to obey imagination. Amor fati reverses that equation. It trains you to meet reality where it stands and say yes to it, without illusion. Modern relationship psychology arrives at the same conclusion from a different direction. Esther Perel, one of the most respected voices on intimacy, frames love not as emotional intoxication, but as a practice of perception. Esther Perel explains, "Love is not constant excitement. It's the ability to see the whole person, accept their imperfections, and repeatedly choose connection with who they are, not who you wish they would be." This shift is quietly revolutionary. When you release expectation, resentment loses its fuel. The mental scorekeeping stops, and something unexpected happens. Change becomes possible. People do not evolve under constant evaluation. They grow where they feel safe. Acceptance does not weaken a relationship, it stabilizes it. Stoicism is not blind acceptance of harm. Justice toward yourself is a virtue. Boundaries matter. But for ordinary human flaws, the Stoic response is clarity, not complaint. Seneca understood that longing for a different reality only robs the present of its strength. Seneca argued, "True happiness is to enjoy the present without anxious dependence on the future." When you stop loving an idea and start loving a human being, the relationship becomes lighter, more honest, more resilient. Amor fati does not erase difficulty, it removes unnecessary suffering. Number 3, the enemy in the mirror. You're on the same side. When conflict begins, something subtle happens in the mind. The person you once trusted becomes an opponent. Words turn into weapons. Listening turns into waiting for your turn to strike back. The goal is no longer understanding, it's winning. From a Stoic perspective, this is where relationships quietly sabotage themselves. Stoicism rejects the idea that life is a series of isolated individuals colliding. It teaches sympathia, the understanding that human beings are interconnected parts of a larger whole. Applied to marriage, this insight is devastatingly simple. If you are truly connected, then your partner cannot be your enemy. Marcus Aurelios governed an empire under constant internal conflict, yet he never forgot this principle. Marcus Aurelios reflected, "We are born for cooperation, like feet, like hands, like eyelids. To act against one another is contrary to nature." When you argue as enemies, you violate the very structure of partnership. You turn a shared problem into a personal attack. The Stoic reframing is immediate and practical. The conflict is not you versus them. It is both of you versus the problem. The problem might be money, stress, exhaustion, miscommunication, but the problem is never the human being standing in front of you. This shift changes everything. Your posture softens. Your words slow down. You stop listening in order to respond and start listening in order to understand. Modern negotiation theory reaches the same conclusion. William Ury, one of the world's leading experts on conflict resolution, offers the same advice in secular language. William Ury explains, sit on the same side of the table. Instead of confronting the person, confront the problem. Once you internalize this, empathy becomes possible again. You recognize that your partner's reactions are not attacks, but expressions of fear, fatigue, or confusion. Even Socrates hinted at this long before Stoicism took form. People do harm, he argued, not because they desire evil, but because they misunderstand what is good. When you see your partner not as a rival, but as a teammate who is also struggling, the argument loses its edge. Cooperation replaces combat. A marriage cannot survive endless internal wars. But a team facing life together can endure far more than either person alone. Number 4, the real duty. Your job isn't happiness, it's character. Modern culture sold us a seductive idea that the purpose of marriage is happiness, that our partner should be our primary source of fulfillment, emotional stability, and meaning. And when that happiness inevitably fluctuates, as it always does, we assume something is broken. From a Stoic perspective, this is a dangerous foundation. Happiness is unstable. It depends on mood, health, stress, circumstances, and countless external variables. To build a marriage on happiness is to build on shifting ground. Stoicism proposes a far more durable aim. Your duty in marriage is not to feel happy. It is to act well. This is the Stoic principle of virtue as the only true good. Happiness may follow, but it cannot be commanded. Character, however, is always within reach. Your task is to practice wisdom in how you speak, justice in how you act, courage in moments of strain, temperance when emotions surge. Epictetus framed life itself as a role to be performed with excellence, regardless of conditions. Epictetus taught, remember that you are an actor in a play. Your task is not to choose the role, but to play it well. If you have chosen the role of partner, then excellence becomes your responsibility, not comfort, not emotional reward. Excellence. This shift restores agency. Instead of asking, is this marriage making me happy, the Stoic asks, am I showing up with integrity? Modern Stoic thinkers echo this logic. Ryan Holiday captures it with stark clarity. Ryan Holiday explains, the Stoics didn't ask, does this make me happy? They asked, is this the right thing to do? When you orient yourself around virtue, something paradoxical occurs. The relationship stabilizes, trust deepens, and happiness appears, not as a goal chased, but as a consequence earned. You cannot control whether a marriage lasts forever. You cannot control your partner's emotional state, but you retain absolute authority over who you are within the relationship. And that authority is the only foundation that does not collapse under pressure. Taken together, these 4 Stoic principles form something rare in modern relationships. Stability, not the fragile kind built on emotional comfort, but the kind built on character. When you stop trying to control what isn't yours, expectation loosens its grip. When you accept reality instead of fighting it, resentment fades. When you remember that your partner is not the enemy, conflict becomes cooperation. And when virtue replaces happiness as the goal, the relationship gains a foundation that pressure cannot easily destroy. Stoicism never promised perfect love. It offered something stronger. The ability to act with clarity, restraint, and integrity when emotions try to take control. This same choice appears far beyond marriage. Some philosophies teach that influence comes from fear, manipulation, and dominance. Others insist that real power begins with self-mastery and moral discipline. In the next video, we'll place these 2 visions face to face and examine what happens when power is pursued without virtue. Consider subscribing and continuing this journey with our community. Let Stoic Lighthouse guide you toward calm, clarity, and wisdom. We'll leave you with a final reflection. You cannot control who your partner becomes, but you always control the character you bring into the relationship. Until the next video.